a little bit about Dionex before we start. So we were founded in 1996. So our client portfolio consists of commercial, government, education, energy, and several other verticals. Our portfolio is split approximately 65% commercial, 35% federal. We have a top secret facility clearance and so forth. But one of the important things that's interesting and really provides a value add for our commercial clients is the fact that that we have to follow NIST guidelines and other regulatory compliance, in addition to the processes, operating procedures, and so forth in our infrastructure and the resiliency built into it for the federal government. Our commercial clients are able to leverage off of that. So webinar objectives. Today, we're going to address on-premise applications or systems that are costly, inefficient, and unreliable, how that might be affecting your organization. You know, is it reasonable to expect that your applications just work? Your data is available from anywhere at any time. We believe the cloud can help. During today's webinar, we'll discuss how migrating to the cloud computing can make your infrastructure more efficient, reliable, and secure. Next slide, Jordan. So questions that you may want to consider. Are you spending time and resources on IT instead of your primary sources of revenue? Is your IT department focused on strategic initiatives that drive the business forward? Are they busy, or are they busy putting out fires on a daily basis and not really able to focus on those strategic initiatives? Is your infrastructure designed for growth, resiliency, fluctuating workloads, security, and market disruption? What is your annual spend on your infrastructure refresh? Your warranty support for your licensing and subscriptions? Your staff and the required training to keep up with those technology changes? Those are all important factors to consider.
So Tim, if you don't mind, I'd like to add to that slide.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so and really, as you can see, you know, the 4 bullet items are, you know, questions to consider really around alignment, right? And it's alignment with the business, with the overall IT strategy or IT organization. So when you're considering these questions, it's really, you know, to pose, are you really aligned? Does everything that IT do really enable the business? And if so, is it clearly mapped, right? And I'll just touch on a couple of the things that, you know, Tim listed right now is, you know, are you spending time and resources on IT spend of your primary source of revenue? So does the cost of IT fund or enable something within the business to perform better, right? To be a market leader in your segment or things like that, right? And if it doesn't, or if it's protecting something from like a brand awareness perspective, right? It really it's a good idea to understand, you know, what the spend and cost of IT is from, you know, cloud to you know, numerous things, and really how does it map back to initiatives within the business? And these are, you know, just 4 main questions that, you know, we always say we like to have people consider just to make sure that it is clearly mapping. And if it isn't, you know, this is when you really start to dig in a little further. So
thank you, James.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide, Jordan. Okay, James, you want to go ahead and take this one?
Yeah, so you know, to Tim's questions around, you know, cloud's unique or you know, questions before, you know, some of the major advantages and uniqueness about cloud is really you have to look at it from the standpoint of what can it do and how can it better help you align and achieve goals within the business, right? And some of the biggest ones, I'll say like low-hanging fruit, would be around disaster recovery and business continuity services. So when you're looking to pivot and move your business more towards, you know, move it more towards a mature overall IT model, looking at things like that you could take advantage from a cloud perspective is, definitely DR, and business continuity, and being able to, one, transition away from old legacy systems into cloud-based systems, but which inherently start to give you the ability to take advantage of the DR recovery capabilities, and give your business, really continuity. Some of the other major unique advantages that you'll see from cloud, and the multiple models of cloud, right, are geo redundancy. So traditionally in the past, people would build data centers, and they'd put one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. They would manage those things, and then as they grow, they would have to continually build or purchase space out of these facilities. Well, that those days are, I like to say, pretty much gone. What you want to be able to do is, you're buying an expectation of a cloud service, and that expectation is it needs to operate, really around the world if that is the requirement. And from a cloud perspective, its unique advantage is you're buying space, and you're buying space in regions, and not physical, thinking of it as physical space. You're buying expectations, like my systems need to be up 24/7. I need to be able to migrate them from the East Coast to West Coast for failure purposes, or I need to keep my data in this region for compliance or regulatory compliance reasons, right? So that geo redundancy capability is something that you get with cloud, of course, but you get it at a faster pace than what you traditionally would get, just with traditional infrastructure. And because you also have a lot of things like efficiencies that are gained. So, an old statistic to throw out there is, on average, it could be 5 to 8 hours to deploy virtual machines, or to really, let's call it, workloads. And there's quite a bit of planning and things like that. There was, hardware purchases and stuff like that. But nowadays, from an efficiency perspective, those have turned in from hours, half days to minutes. And not just deploying it in one facility, it's also deploying it across, you know, um, across multiple facilities, around the U.S. or across the world. The other major efficiency gain, you see from a cloud perspective is really around, I would say, dynamic workload capability. So if your systems are operating at a high utilization rate, let's just call like a web server, and you need to spin up another one and add it to, add another one or another two or three, you have the ability in the cloud to go ahead and dynamically add resources, resources to those workloads to ensure that, one, your website is performing where it needs to be, or the services that you're providing from those particular cloud services are performing where they need to be. So you have that ability to scale up and scale down. That's brought a lot of efficiencies as well. Some of the other things, really around like security, management, scalability, and elasticity. I kind of touched on the scalability and elasticity. You have the ability to scale up, and scale down. You have the ability to really ramp up based on certain times of the year, for retail type clients and things. Um, and then from a management perspective, you also now have the ability, if you have a geo-redundancy type design, and you have your workload spread across multiple regions, you also have that single pane of glass from a management perspective, right? You have like for like systems that you could easily manage through one platform, one technology. You're not worrying about really managing multiple different platforms and aging equipment that's underneath that. That's really not a worry of organizations anymore when they're moving to the cloud, right? That's one of the biggest things, from an efficiency perspective. I'll say from a cost perspective, as a human capital element to manage these type of systems. Now you're really just managing the expectation and performance of these systems, and through a single pane of glass. Now that changes a little bit, right? When we start talking, in the further slides about the different cloud models and having hybrid and such, but there's some the ways to have that still that same single pane of glass. The other major one is really around security, and when we talk about advantages of cloud, a lot of individuals say, well, cloud's not secure, and really, that's not necessarily true. Early on, I think security was an afterthought. for cloud, and then it really, as it took off, it became more so we need to do this now, and they accelerated the maturity of security on cloud. So from a unique advantage from a security perspective is just the same type of scale and scalability and elasticity that you have from, I'll say from an infrastructure perspective. You have the same from a security perspective, right? So if you're using a hyperscaler like AWS or Azure, you have the ability to roll out security services, not a program, but services, right? Where traditionally in the past you had to buy a product and go get it implemented and do all these things. Now you have the ability to basically point, click, and enable, and then start to configure and then get billed on a monthly basis, a consumption basis as well, right? For those type of security services. So the time to market or the time to deployment for security services and the breadth of them have really grown. So from enabling DDoS protection or managed security services like EDR or SIM or SOAR type things, have really, the time is reduced when you're starting to look at some of those other services, right? Again, there's quite a bit of configuration and things that can go into that, and also it's not a security program, so there still has to be a lot of strategy, I would say, put in place prior to enabling those services. But once that is done, the actual deployment time is really has increased over time when you're looking at like pure public cloud and those type of technologies. So
Thank you, James.
yep.
Hey, James, we had a question come in. It says, as cloud adoption becomes more common and therefore the offerings/options become more diverse, how does DYOPATH make sure to stay on top of the latest and greatest?
Yeah, so and really, cloud adoption is really, I would say, it took off on smaller accounts, smaller type companies first. Let's just say out of the small and medium businesses, and now that what we're really starting to see is medium businesses and even enterprises medium businesses really move fairly quick to the cloud. From a how do we stay on top of those type of things, and a lot of it is training, a lot of it is our own research. The unique advantage I would say that DYOPATH has, which is unique to managed service providers in general, is really that our engineers, we're really focused on working on these different technologies day to day. So with the wide breadth of accounts that we actually have, a lot of our clients use different type of cloud services and cloud technology. So one, there's just an internal, there's just an internal practice for training and those type of things, but then also it's the real world experience of utilizing them in different markets across our client base, and on top of that, the research and development that we do of those technologies as well.
And James, if I can add, it goes back to one of the first slides. Are you spending your time and resources supporting IT versus the revenue streams? And really, as fast as technology is increasing and new and more efficient tools are being introduced, it becomes a huge burden on companies that provide their own IT support to keep up with that learning curve as well as the technology.
Yeah.
Next slide, Jordan.
So, going into some of the models that I talked about, customizing your cloud to meet your needs, right? So when people are looking at cloud, right, they look at just the buzzword of cloud. There's different flavors of that. You have hybrid cloud, you have private cloud, you have public cloud, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are familiar with public cloud providers being your AWS's, Google, and Microsoft Azure. Your private cloud being mainly on-premise or providers that have built out within data centers. Private infrastructure. It could be dedicated hardware for particular clients. It could be shared or flavors of shared hardware for clients that that are delivered with like a AWS hypervisor, or sorry, not AWS, with the Microsoft hypervisor or with the VMware hypervisor on those platforms. And then, or it also could be a client has built out their own private cloud infrastructure based on VMware or Microsoft Azure, so or Microsoft Hyper-V technology. So, and then you start looking at the hybrid cloud, which is really, I would say, an architecture, more of a type of architecture. So, when does it make sense to look at, utilizing public cloud for certain workloads within the environment? When does it make sense to utilize or keep items in a private cloud, and combining those two to take advantage? So, a lot of clients, we see might start off in private cloud, start to really understand their workloads, and then they move certain items to public cloud, or they take advantage of like DR services or backup services, to public cloud to reduce cost and things of storage, reduce cost for storage, or just the ability to replicate, data or DR images and things like that into the public cloud for failover capabilities. Some actually utilize, this hybrid cloud approach for applications. So some start off with like a dev app in private, and once they're going live, they understand the workload and the requirements, they move it over to public. Some do the opposite, where they start off in public and then move it back over into private to control it and control costs. So really, it's just understanding, which models, work best for you and how the workloads, really what models align to the right workload. So, and the overall cloud approach gives you the ability to customize, really customize where you need to put your workloads, how they need to operate. It really puts that back into to your hands to be able to do. So, Tim, did I
We
go
had
ahead?
we had a question come in. It's kind of a two-part question. It
Yep.
says, how difficult would it be for a company to transition from a private cloud to a hybrid cloud? And the second part of the question is, and what would that timeline look like?
Yeah. So difficulty, I would say a couple years ago, it has some, challenges. It had some challenges, right? Nowadays, being able to really have your workloads portable is a lot easier when you're looking at more of like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. Those can be a little bit more difficult when you're talking about moving them around from like Google or to AWS, platform as a service offerings. Because what you start to look at is most people, when they talk about migrating between the two, they're thinking about data portability. They're not thinking about workload portability. So when you look at workload portability, that is moving like your full-blown, in my mind, it's your full-blown platform that you've built upon, developed on, Google, and trying to move that into AWS. And there's some challenges because every cloud is built differently, uses different underlying technologies. But if we're talking strict infrastructure as a service, very easy these days to do that. Timeline, it really depends on the amount of data. So, and complexity of your systems. We've seen some, be done within about 30 days, and then others could take up to a year to 2 years, just based on the size of the systems, the amount of data you're trying to ingest, or if there is coding that needs to be, changed from a workload portability standpoint. Those are really the ones that take a little bit longer, might have to be redeveloped on top of, one platform versus the originating platform. So.
And James, I get the impression sometimes people believe that a hybrid cloud is the components are one private cloud and one public cloud, but that's not really accurate. It can consist of multiple private cloud environments or providers as well as public. And one of the advantages of being able to have infrastructures like that, oftentimes applications really aren't compatible with one private cloud infrastructure. depending on how they were developed, right? Like an SAP or Oracle application running on something that's in your private cloud. If you want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. So hybrid cloud is, I won't say a type of cloud, it is a architecture or an architecture of cloud platforms. So you have public cloud and its feature sets. You have private cloud and its feature sets. You even have what I would consider you know, pure true private cloud, which could be client owned. So I mean, you have client owned private cloud, you have private cloud providers. Um, you know, so it's the linking of those systems together in one architecture or one cloud strategy really is what your hybrid cloud approach. And to your point, Tim, about what drives that, it really could be, you know, like you said, it could be legacy applications. You know, it could be I have this Unix-based system that only runs on this particular type of hardware, and you know, it's not supported or cannot be upgraded to run on a hypervisor platform, right? And if so, you know, it needs to stay, you know, in on-prem, right? Or you have a private cloud that has very stringent security requirements that you know you do not want to move maybe to public cloud, right? Or you don't qualify for the AWS Gov Cloud or something along those lines. So you want it more secure than what's out there. So you want to keep it on. You can keep it on-prem and add the layers of security you need there. So there's a multitude of reasons, you know, why hybrid cloud, and really just around, you know, the type of workloads and things that you know, drive that. So
Thank you, James.
Thanks.
Next slide, Jordan.
so
Great,
yeah,
James.
Tim, I'll take this one. So that all right? So understanding your cloud needs. So I know Tim's going to have a different view on some of these things as I do. Just and I think both are really good. So understanding the pain points driving research into the cloud. So understanding what you really are trying to achieve out of cloud is critical. So we talked about the strategy and we talked about like security program versus just security services. You know, really when you start to look at the cloud, you need to understand what the needs are. What are the drivers from the business perspective that is driving you to look into cloud? You know, and that is critical for success. So, you know, understanding the pain points that are driving the research into the cloud. You know, are you not able to move quick enough? Are you not able to keep up with the demand of the business? You know, that those are some of those items that, you know, you need to really understand. And then understanding your applications, your systems, and their criticality. So there's been many times where people have said to us, I want to move everything in the cloud. I want a cloud first approach. And so we start to look at their systems, and what we end up having to do is create a roadmap and say, well, to get there, you need to do these level of upgrades to get you to this point. And this then in turn allows you to start saying, how do we want to shift these workloads? Do they go to public? Do they go to private? Is it a combination? You know, where is the production environment reside, and where should DR reside, and all those type of things. So really understanding your inventory from an application perspective. Is it portable? Is it not? Is there a major development initiative that needs to take, right? Those are some of the hidden costs that people forget about. They think of just picking it up and dropping it into a cloud sometimes. And sometimes it is that simple, but other times it's not. And then really understanding the systems, their age. You know, we've had clients that had systems running for many years, and the concern is, well, we have to reboot this, and their concern was, well, we don't know if it's going to come back up. So understanding the age of the systems and things like that is critical as well. And really, how critical are those applications? So really think of more of like a business impact analysis, maybe of understanding, you know, what is the criticality of the business and to which business units too. So one of the other things with this is getting a good understanding of when you do move to the cloud, which business units need to move at the same time. So, we usually like to say, don't move your sales and your financials at the same time, right? Or if you can carve certain departments up in certain ways when moving systems over, right? That's not always a luxury, or that we have sometimes, but really understanding the criticality, what that app does, and what business unit that it services is all critical, and that mapping needs to occur as well. And then understanding your compliance requirements. So when you're starting to look at different cloud, platform or cloud models, public, private, hybrid, you need to understand too, are you doing this for compliance reasons? Do you need to be, CMMC? Are you going the route of CMMC? Do you have to be, are you SOX, need to have SOX compliance, or, just numerous ones that are out there? Do you have to align with NIST? And those controls. So understanding what your compliance requirements are before you move is also a determining factor of where you tend to put your data, right? I know I've seen where individuals have sent me a link to Microsoft's Azure page with all their certifications and accreditations and all that, and I'm like, yeah, that's great. I was like, so who's configuring your system to who's configuring your systems, because their systems are configured to be compliant, but that does not necessarily mean your systems are configured and secured to be compliant as well. So, so those conversations need to occur as well. Really understanding the compliance requirements is key. And then understanding the business, the business requirements around disaster recovery and business continuity. What are those needs? So when you're ranking those applications based on their criticality and the business units, understanding where do they need to go in the event of a DR, and when those do get failed over, how do you continue to conduct business? And those are critical too, right? Because each cloud can be designed to do what you need it to do from a DR and a business continuity perspective, but which one better aligns to what you want and your requirements and timelines. So that's something to take in consideration as well. So,
and James, yeah, I'll just add, we often engage clients, or when we talk to them about these kind of questions, they find it overwhelming and don't really know where to start or what they should be looking at and things like that. And that's where a company like DYOPATH comes into play to be that consultant type of service, either via an assessment, which we'll talk about shortly, or just during our due diligence when we initially engage with a client, asking these types of questions so we can kind of start maybe working on a grease board or something and designing a potential infrastructure and talking the potential client through that and pros and cons of each approach and any risk associated or cost and things like that before they even get to a decision, but lay all that out for them to ensure that they fully understand all of those aspects. Okay, Jordan?
So, so what makes when we're talking about different clouds, so what makes hybrid cloud a preferred option, or I'll probably say what makes it the ideal solution for most. Really, it really depends, and some of those areas are going to be cost. So a hybrid cloud solution you can take advantage of the ability to have really cheap storage for a lot of data that you're archiving, but your production storage, you don't want to pay the transaction fees on, and you want to have it more in a kind of a standardized non-transactional model. So there's some very significant cost savings that can occur by utilizing a hybrid cloud approach or hybrid cloud solution. Scale as well is a major one. A lot of people like the ability to control what they have in a private cloud or on-premise private cloud, and then being able to scale out to a public cloud or vice versa sometimes too. But the ability to scale, I will say, up in resources and scale out in resources it is also a major advantage can be a major advantage of public cloud as well as a hybrid cloud solution. So if you need to scale out of your private cloud into public cloud for DR purposes or demand that you have on workloads, it can be very easily configured to do so. And then from a control perspective, hybrid cloud is also a great solution from an overall control perspective. So if you want to have more control over certain systems, you need control to the actual hardware level and things like that. The advantages there, really being able to have that hybrid cloud solution where you could have the private cloud control that you need, and then push workloads to public cloud. Public cloud systems for systems that don't require as much control or really stringent regulations. There are solutions like I was talking earlier with like AWS government gov cloud solutions, or even on the Azure side as well. They do have those, but those are usually reserved for government entities or other local state entities as well, or if you're a federal contractor. So the other one from a hybrid cloud perspective is age of the system. So when you start to look at, I need a plan to get to, off of my aging, infrastructure and those type of things. Having a roadmap to say, okay, these systems need to be upgraded. Well, I'm going to upgrade from physical hardware to my private cloud to have a little more control than what I want, and then I can move it into public cloud if it makes sense. So those are some of the advantages really around age of systems. Now that scenario can change. Sometimes it's easy to just go straight to public cloud. In other instances, you want more control and you want to do more of a phased approach into maybe a private cloud, and then determine, does it belong in public cloud. Security, again, very similar. You have quite a bit more control, I will say, from a security perspective and what gets exposed to you in a private cloud. So you have the ability to you really have the ability to control more of security than you do in public cloud. That is coming a long way, right? You have certain systems or services that have been deployed in Azure, like their Sentinel SIM and other things like their DDoS and things like that, right? That you could take advantage of. But again, when you start to say, I want this overall view of my environment from on-premise infrastructure to my on-premise network equipment, all these, having some of those things located in a private cloud that you can control, and you're not really dictated on how you access these systems. It's really okay. I can pull logs, I can pull all this information down into the system. Those really play well into an overall hybrid cloud solution.
And then James, if I might add,
Yeah, go ahead.
on cost, often the majority of times our clients are expecting a fixed price monthly for what their cloud spend is or managed services. And you had talked about transaction fees in the public cloud. So that's really important. But what transaction fees are is when you're accessing, each time you access your data, you're getting charged transaction fees. So depending on what applications you're placing into public cloud can, either minimize that or increase that, so they can fluctuate wildly during seasonal interactions or things like that. So that's why you want to be careful and make sure that you understand which applications and what the impacts are when you're putting them in a private or a public cloud environment. Okay, Jordan? So success factors within the cloud. So we spoke about this quite a bit, but really, the goal is to improve productivity with an integrated cloud solution. As companies, the initial challenge when cloud came about, and even for several years, were, and we still see it today, a lot of their systems were stovepiped, if you will. They weren't thought out to really work in unison and to have a structure where the systems were integrated and communicated with each other efficiently and so forth. So these days with cloud, we're able to do that. Results in faster time to market, company growth increases. You know, we're really looking, as James spoke about earlier, allowing the IT department within the company, or even help from companies like DYOPATH, to really focus on those revenue streams and introduce those types of systems or projects that'll really add value to your business, instead of just constantly in that tread water mode trying to keep the lights on. So it's a big value add. Operational cost to savings, more secure environment. You know, when everybody sees, you know, the issues going on with the cybersecurity attacks globally, the ransomware, phishing attacks, or even internal attacks, you know, the cost savings, the issues that it causes for a business for downtime and so forth are significant, and the attackers are becoming more bold as well as more sophisticated with their tools that they're employing. So it's really something to be aware of and make sure that you mitigate that as fast as possible. And then availability, you know, with today's environment, with COVID or hurricanes or whatever it might be, the cloud provides the ability to access your data from anywhere in the world at any time. And James, if you want to expand on some of that, please do.
Yeah, I mean, those are, Tim, those are all great, you know, success factors that you have to look at from, you know, from a cloud perspective. I think I'll kind of reference back to the previous slide, is really understanding the needs, what you're trying to accomplish, right? Going to the cloud is great, but if you don't understand or have a good understanding on, you know, what are those true needs, moving to the cloud can also be costly. It could also create inefficiencies, right? If not done right, or the right solution is not chosen, you know, or right due diligence wasn't done on the type of cloud or the configuration of the cloud. That's another major one that we see, right? So, you know, really those success factors, you know, really depend on, you know, identifying the needs that you have, and why you're going to the cloud, and you know, in turn, you'll have the ability to you know, move faster to market on things. You'll be able to keep up with the business, you know, business expectations and growth, right? And then honestly, the other piece of it is the operational cost savings. One big thing there I will say is, you know, when moving to the cloud, what we see a lot of companies, you know, they do have an initial cost savings, but once they see the flexibility, they see the ease of it. What we also see within about, you know, probably 4 to, you know, 6 months afterwards of it really running, is you'll see this increase in cost coming from cloud, because it's so easy to deploy. So one of the other things is just creating a really a governance component for cloud to ensure, okay, understand what our costs are, when do we deploy these things, what are the impacts will be, because you can lose control of cost in cloud as well pretty easy. You hear the horror stories of, I got a bill, and you know, I got a bill and it's what I expected, and then next month it was $20,000 higher, right? Or you know, $5,000 higher, or so on. You know, just not understanding the impacts of cost, right? You know, outside of that, Tim, I think, you know, pretty much you hit on majority of the success factors, you know, within the cloud.
Okay. Jordan, any questions before we move to the next slide?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. So look, we've spoke about the cloud and its advantages and some of the cautions around it and so forth, but in reality, the cloud provides real results, right? Some of the actions that you may want to consider is getting an assessment of your application and systems and processes and things like that, or just a consultation, you know, experience with somebody like DYOPATH, where we come in and just want to understand and do a little bit of due diligence and a conversation, and maybe send you a questionnaire to tell us a little more about your applications and your systems and so forth, where we could kind of, you know, provide you some guidance in your path ahead. And, you know, you want to inventory your workloads and categorize them for, you know, your business criticality. Which applications have to be up and can never go down? Which ones can I do without for a day or two? Because we speak with a lot of potential clients and they say, my whole system, I can't lose anything, it can never go down. And when you start saying things like that, it gets very expensive because of the replication and things like that have to happen. You know, you're taking snapshots more often, you're backing up more often, or you're even going to an active environment where you've got two data centers basically mirroring each other. So those are things to really talk through. You know, how long could you be down without your system at all? You know, those are things to look at. We have found, you know, NIST and the FBI put a study out about 2 years ago saying that about 78% of all small businesses that suffered a major cybersecurity attack were out of business within 5 years because they didn't have or consider the continuity and disaster recovery, you know, and the criticality of their applications and what impact it had to their business. Some of you may use Salesforce. About a month ago, Salesforce went down globally for, I guess, about 8 hours. And, you know, when you have something like that happen, you start to think, what would I do? How would I sell? All my data is in Salesforce. So, you know, that's business criticality and impact and things like that. Data security requirements, you know, what stuff do I need to lock down? You know, my financials or my personnel records, you know, with their social security numbers and things like that, you know, insurance. And then the scalability. How rapid do you need to be able to scale up or scale down to be more efficient and make sure you're not spending resources that you don't need to spend, or you know, when you're awarded a new contract or bringing on a new line of business, to be able to really get to that market much more efficiently and rapidly. Look at the scalability of your infrastructure. And then the support requirements, you know, what's it going to take me to support this? You know, do I have somebody that can actually support this, or do I need to speak with somebody? And James, if you want to add on to that, please do.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like Tim said, that inventorying your workloads and categorizing them as follows. I mean, the main thing is really kind of a self-assessment on you know, inventorying what you have out there. So your systems, your applications, the requirements associated with them, how critical, and categorizing them based on how critical they are to your business. You know, what are those features, those functionalities, and those requirements that you need, you know, really to have in place, and you know, that all really has to be done prior to going to the cloud. But you know, really working with somebody from an assessment perspective or a consultation perspective is critical to really drive out what those requirements are, you know, when you're moving to the cloud. So.
Okay, James, thank you. All right. Any additional questions that anybody has that they'd like to ask? We can hang on for a few minutes if you'd like. If you'd rather not ask in a public setting, you can reach us via www.solutions@dyopath.com, or you can call our phone number, easily found on our website, to learn more. We're happy to speak with you, meet with you in person, or whatever your desires are, but please don't hesitate. There are no dumb questions. We're happy to to address and just have a conversation with you.
Hey, Tim, we just had a few more questions come in. How do you help ensure that internet connectivity is as consistent as possible, given that a cloud setup depends on a strong and consistent internet?
That's a great question. James, you want to take that?
Yeah, so really it depends, right? So when you talk about building in the resiliency and those type of things, so when you're starting to really start to inventory your system and your applications, you're going to have to document what the actual demands are from an architecture perspective. And I'll give you a great example. We had a client that moved to 365, prior to us, and they had very, very, very small internet pipe, right? And they started to move different workloads and different things to that, and voice, and they started to experience a degradation of service, right? So because the internet pipe wasn't sized correctly and it was single threaded, and basically, they had an outage. Anytime they had an outage, they basically lost connectivity to everything. So those are some of the things that need to be taken in consideration. Is how many systems are you moving to the cloud? How dependent are the business units on those cloud platforms? How critical are those? Does that warrant multiple internet pipes, right? Does it warrant really kind of like an SD-WAN type solution? So there is an architecture, a sizing component to assessing, when going to the cloud. And really that all has to be taken in consideration, right? Because at the end of the day, what we usually see is an increase in internet, connectivity requirements in internet connectivity go up. And then also the redundancy of it goes up because you are moving things outside of your office, or direct connections right into a public or private cloud. So you do definitely have to take that in consideration of how resilient those connections are, and then the amount of bandwidth that you need as well.
Hey, James, if I can just add to that. So
Yeah.
from a physical perspective, the private cloud infrastructure that DYOPATH offers is out of multiple data centers, as James mentioned, but they're out of Tier 4 SOC 2 compliant SSAE 18, which is basically the Tier 4 is the highest tier in data center redundancy that you can receive. And part of that qualification for Tier 4 are multiple ingress points with a minimum of 4 different connectivity providers coming into the building at different points. So if we cut a line or there's a major outage with one of the providers, we've still got that backbone of a minimum of 3 other providers providing those connectivity services. Okay, Jordan, next question.
Next question. If I put production servers and customer-facing applications in a major public provider, could I expect less worry on security or more?
Again, it goes back to design. At the end of the day, if not done correctly, then you could be more insecure, right? It'll be a more insecure environment, or less secure environment. So it really depends, again, on what is constructed from an overall cloud strategy and architect perspective. Short answer is you're only as secure as the design that you put in place. So if you're moving workloads to private or public, and you don't go through the right security architecture review when you're deploying, then you could open up yourself. And there's been numerous people that did that. They moved their workloads to AWS. They just thought, oh, it's secure. And then what they didn't realize is they did not secure access to their tenant, and basically left open the ability to have somebody go in and delete their workloads and delete their backups, and they were left susceptible to those type of attacks and things like that. So you're only as secure as you design it. Doesn't matter if it's on cloud or on premise or just even physical infrastructure.
And James, earlier you spoke about security in a public cloud, and you mentioned there's security tools that with a click you can add, but it wasn't a security program. So that's also a big differentiator for DYOPATH, because we don't look at security as strictly tool-based, right? It's a combination of several factors, and one of them still requires that human element. And what I mean by that, our SIM solution comes with a 24/7 live manned SOC component that is actually monitoring your applications, whether it's public or private, and can really keep the alerting and keep the mitigation down if there is an attack. So James, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing really is, you know, security or cloud or any of these, you have to have an approach, you have to have a program, right? That's put in place to manage these type of things. So, you know, cloud and security and what other, you know, what other items there might be out there, right? But you have to have really a program in place to manage these, and don't treat them as just hardware or just, you know, tools or services, right? There really has to be more of a program approach to managing these type of services. So.
Exactly. Okay, Jordan, anything else?
No, sir, that is all we have for now. But I would just like to thank everybody for joining today's webinar. A recording will be sent out later today, as well as the deck, and we will be putting the recording on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to find it there as well. If you're interested in any other events hosted by DYOPATH, you can find them on our events page on dyopath.com/events. And I hope that everybody has a great day.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.